Now let me introduce you to our special guest tonight, Ben Hurle. Ben is the president of the Victorian UFO Action Group in Victoria.
Yeah.
And he's going to fill you in on some of the very interesting Victorian cases that he's brought along tonight. Some you will have heard of, but many you will not. And it's always good to know what's going on in Australia in your own backyard. So without any further ado, would you please welcome Ben Hurle?
Thanks, Cheryl. So join me as we have a look at today what's been happening in Victoria. Now my talk is entitled Victoria, A History of Mystery. And they are pretty true words. Some really, really great UFO cases have occurred south of the border, down there in that part of the world. And I'm Victorian born and bred. So basically I've always pretty much been in the country, which I love, it's great. And the dark skies of the country and the lonely roads are the places often where UFOs appear. And they'll appear to ordinary people. So you don't have to be special to see a UFO. I think that anyone has that potential to do that. I chose that picture for a reason. That's from a UFO sighting in 2012 in the western suburbs of Melbourne, out in Albanvale, which is near St Albans. So it's right out in that sort of over near Tullamarine sort of area. The planes come and go. Anyone who lives near Tullamarine sees all sorts of air activity all the time. And this video was taken by one of my team members. And he was in his backyard. He's got a pool and palm trees and all that sort of stuff, and he's sitting by his pool and he sees this thing in the sky, and it's just playfully flicking around, darting, dropping, spinning, and he took this footage of it. And it really is an amazing piece of footage, and it kind of shows you, I don't know, you can look at it and you can see many things. And one thing that we sort of thought that we saw in it was a little grey right here as a potential thing. I'm not saying that that's a grey, but I'm saying when you look at photos, be very careful, because you can see things in them that may or may not be there. The other thing about this photo too, it's got that lovely iridescent colour, and this object was displaying that. And one of the things I really look for and love in UFO sightings that really piques my interest is light. What light does, how light behaves, the quality of the light, the different type of light that it is. And often a UFO will have a very distinct or, an unusual light that doesn't look like an LED. Why would it look like an LED? They're not making LEDs. Certainly not an incandescent globe making that thing glow. So they're using some type of lighting system that's lighting up, whether it's the power source. Who knows? A lot of speculation tonight. Is that a little man sitting there? And we kind of thought that in a tongue-in-cheek kind of a way. You can see this sort of like it might be in some type of a, I don't know, gelatinous environment or something. Who knows? It could be an organic type of a thing. It could be a trick of the light. So anything like that is possible. So that footage made it onto Channel 7, onto the Sunrise program a few years ago. I'm talking about the history of mystery tonight, so I'm going to go back in the past. We're going to go archaeological, we're going to go back in time. But I thought on the opening to my talk I would actually put up a more recent image to show that this is still happening now. This phenomenon is alive, it's here, it's been with us for a very long time, and it's going to continue to be with us for a very long time. Okay, so where do UFOs appear? Well, the first thing I say is that UFOs actually appear everywhere. That might sound really nutty, like I'm some sort of guy who's paranoid and think that UFOs are just everywhere, like they're everywhere. I don't mean that. What I mean is, in my state of Victoria, UFOs have appeared everywhere. It may not happen all at once, but every region here has an extensive UFO history. There's not a section of that map where UFOs have not appeared, where UFOs have not interacted with Victorians going about doing their ordinary Victorian things. So that they do appear everywhere. So there are hotspots also. There's hotspots in Victoria where there's more activity, where there's been more activity over a longer period of time. That doesn't discount other areas where every area has got its own UFO history, but if I picked up the pointer and didn't walk over to the screen, then I would say East Gippsland, where I'm from. Lana and I live about here where the dot is, maybe about there. That area there has an extensive UFO history. Around Melbourne, around the Mornington Peninsula, and the Dandenong area, Narre Warren, of all places, Pakenham, places like that. Out of Melbourne, you know, there's really not much there other than tracts of houses in the foothills of the Dandenong Ranges. The Golden Triangle here, the Golden Triangle, the Gold Rush, Bendigo, Ballarat, Ararat, that area, big UFO history in there. Lots of UFO sightings around that area there. Horsham, over here. They've had their fair share of UFOs over there as well. And of course, up in the Mallee, the top part of the state. Mildura being the largest town up in that area, and a whole host of little places you've never heard of. But that place up there is absolutely a UFO hotspot. Right on the edge of the desert country, big wheat farms, and we'll talk a bit about that a bit later. So why historical cases? I class an historical case as being 10 years or older when the information starts to disappear. Basically, when you're finding it really hard to find things, you're probably dealing with an historical case. Witnesses could be dead. Files or information's gone missing, that sort of thing. We can learn a lot because some of the best cases of all are really old cases. And I'm talking like an auctioneer, but if I get through to the cases to talk about, you'll see how great some of these old cases really, really are. And so they contribute to that body of evidence, the old cases. They're all on yellowing old feathering pieces of fool's cap paper, in old records, in old UFO groups, in dusty filing cabinets with bird cages on top of them. They're not digitised. They're not out there for you guys to be able to access or to look at. You know, it's just not how it is. All the old records are still in those old formats, and people like the guys up the back are doing work to digitise their stuff. We've started doing ours, but it's a laborious and boring job. And you just got to do it when you've got the time to do it. And so cold cases should never disappear, and you should never write them off either. I always think cold cases are great, and preserve it all while we actually can. So that was just a bit of a newspaper grab from the Westall. We're going to start in 1966. A great UFO flap occurred in 1966 and in 1978. That's two really crucial eras in Victorian UFO history, 1966 and 1978. Very crucial periods of time. So there was 4 unusual events that occurred in April 1966. So April is autumn. I always take a note of what time of year these things happen too. Winter, summer, spring, when did they occur? So on the 2nd of April 1966, this photo was taken above the leafy Melbourne suburb of Deep Dean, which is also known as Balwyn. It's in inner Melbourne. It's in that nice little wealthy zone there, just outside the city. Lovely houses, all of them just so expensive. That was taken there. 4th of April 1966, Burke's flat, the bending headlight case. A gentleman's driving along the Wimmera Highway. He sees a thing to the side of the road, and it opens up, and his headlights are bent off the road towards the object. He nearly follows it. He misses and nearly crashes into a tree, drives off all spooked, as I imagine you would be. 6th of April 1966, the Westall schoolyard encounter occurred when 150 kids at 10:30 in the morning are out there, well, not 150 of them, but some of them were out in the oval playing sport. And out of the northwestern sky comes these 3 discs come across the sky, and the kids are like, and the teachers are like, and the thing comes, it lands. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But that was a big event. Hushed up, gone, quietened down, stood upon, stamped out. That's what happened to it. 7th of April 1966, a 19-year-old man was killed at Burke's flat, the exact same place where Ron Sullivan nearly crashed his car. A young man died at the exact spot, not 50 metres up the road, not 100, not a kilometre up the road, at the exact spot. Interesting. When we concluded our Burke's flat investigation, we'd found that the government actually had done some investigative work into that case, like they did with Westall, like they did with a lot of cases. And the paddock became a local attraction where this thing had divided into two halves with coloured lights passing between it, and it took off and it left an impression in the ground. And like the public came, the media all came out, the Herald Sun took photos, the camera crews were there apparently. The landowner who we spoke to remembered men in uniform in the paddock looking at and discussing the case with her husband who had since died. And in that area, farming families had the land since 1832 without it changing. So they're really old established farms out there. And Ron Sullivan, who was the man, was visited by two high-ranking Air Force officers. They made an appointment at his place of business. They came and they spoke to him to discuss his encounter. They questioned him and they inspected his car, and off they went. They went off. That was the two wing commander such and such and group commander such and such. Made an appointment, came and spoke to him. Many years later, two men in plain suits visit Ron again with a book. And they open it up and they say, "Which one is it, Mr. Sullivan?" And they asked him to point to a series of UFOs in this book. They were plainclothed. And he said, "Oh, well, it looks like that one. Thank you very much." And they turned around and they walked out the door. So that shows you that, you know, which one was it, Mr. Sullivan, is a really interesting statement, because there's people out there who, in the government, who have looked at this case, but none of this information is available in the public record. And so in 1982, the Air Force opened up their files, and New South Wales researcher Bill Chalker was given access to those files. But he found nothing on Burke's Flat, he found nothing on Westall, he found nothing on half a dozen other cases that he was looking for. There's no records. No records. You can't tell me that wing commander and group commander can go talk to a man and not have to write a report and account for their time. And, you know, guys like that just don't disappear around the countryside. They've got to report where they went and what they did. You can't access those reports. Top secret. So it does get you thinking. So a documentary was called Burke's Flat, A Tale of Two Men. That was 6 months worth of investigation. And it's on our YouTube channel. And it basically juxtaposes, a bit of an art word, Ron Sullivan's bending headlight experience with Gary Taylor, who died at the age of 19 at the exact same spot. So if you get a chance, check it out. Past that. Okay, so other key Victorian UFO events, and I could talk for 3 hours about each of these cases as well, but we're not going to. We're only going to do grace notes on these cases because I'm doing an historical discussion. So Fred Valentich disappeared over Bass Strait, 21st of October 1978. Another major flap. And you'll see that some of these cases I'm talking about tonight did occur in 1978. The Rosedale UFO, this water tank here was drained of all its water one night in September 30, 1980. I think I was about 11 at the time, and I wasn't available to go have a look. This is the witness here, George Blackwell, with Keith Basterfield, who's a South Australian researcher, also an excellent researcher. And this tank was basically, short version, he woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning on the farm. All the stock were going crazy. The cows were just bellowing, running around, going ballistic. The horses were neighing and everything was going absolutely mad. He steps outside because he thought it was rustlers. And he's the farm manager, not the farm owner. And he sees coming across the paddock at low altitude this, what he thought was a plane, low. And it comes over the top of the shed, and this cow tries to burrow into the shed, and there's all sorts of chaos and the stock's going mad. And it floats out across the paddocks and it goes over to the water tank and it sits on top of the water tank. So he hops on his little CT125 motorbike, little Honda or whatever it was, hops on that and puts out to a gate which was about, I don't know, it was probably about 250 metres from the tank where the saucer was hovering over the top of the tank. The saucer landed on the top of the tank and this thing inflated around it like a rubber ring, like a tractor tyre inner. And it goes, whoop, opens up, and it sits there on top of the tank. And he's sitting there watching this unbelievable event, and then it lifts off the tank and it flies over and it lands next to the tank, like this. It's sitting on the ground and it's spinning on the ground. And then this pulse comes out of it, like boom. And he instantly feels really crook, and he is weak and he has no ability to practically think at that time, and the object lifts off and it takes off and it disappears. He gets back to his bed and he falls asleep. The farm owner comes around the next day, and the farm owner finds him in bed. What the hell are you doing in bed? Oh, bloody crook. What the hell's going on? Something weird happened last night. And his watch had stopped at 1 a.m. So his watch had actually stopped at that time when this thing appeared. So that's really interesting as well. So they go out and they see this big circular thing, and this tank is right on the Princess Hot. Not that one now; it's been replaced by a new plastic green tank. But it's in the exact same location. And every time people drive up and down that highway, within 100 metres, they are going past where this unbelievable UFO event occurred. And unless you know about it, you wouldn't think twice about it. So that's that case. This case here, Kelly Cahill, 8th of August 1993. Very interesting case. This had the potential, and I say the potential, to be the best case in the world. It really did, because it's a close encounter abduction experience with independent parties. So often an abduction or a close encounter of the third kind experience is one person's experience, a very individual experience. They took me there. No one else was involved, but they took me. This case here had 6 people standing on the side of a road in Narre Warren, looking at this football field sized craft with amber big windows, with little guys standing in there looking back at them about a couple hundred metres back in the paddock. And then a blue light comes out under the craft down to the ground, and this mist comes out, and then all these little black guys go bing, 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 and they appear at the bottom of the craft. And then all their eyes light up. Red, really red, like a stoplight, red. And they come across the field, a whole group of them. And they weren't running, they were gliding. And they glided across the field and they split up into different groups. And one group went one way, the other group went the other way. That big bass feeling came from the craft, and they were all knocked off their feet. So like when you go to the big day out or something like that, and you got that big bass crashing sound and it's hitting you in the chest, it was like that. And they basically get knocked to the ground, and that's that particular case. So that was 1993. Got a lot of media attention at the time in the mainstream media, and Kelly went on to go to America and speak at MUFON conferences, and it really became a big case. And I'm sure there's people here, hands up if you're familiar with the case. Yeah, so a lot of people do know about this case. So these to my mind, are probably the 3 other big cases outside of that little 1966 situation that occurred, and they're very important cases. Righto, Dargo. Righto, I love Dargo. It's a small town. It's Victoria's most isolated town. It's in the high country. You drive into it, and then you drive out of it. There are a couple of 4-wheel drive tracks that go up to Mount Hotham if you like skiing. You can go up there, but you can only do that in summertime. Forget it in the winter. It's an isolated little high country town, and it is awesome. It is a great place. Me and Lana went up there. I'll tell the story more fully than that, but we went up there and we just found more UFO stories when we went up there. It was incredible. So every man believes in God after dark, and I think that's pretty true. We could stand here and say, no, I don't believe in God. Like, no, at all. But you get in a dark road at night, and I think you might be more inclined to perhaps maybe consider the idea that God may exist. Every man believes in God after dark. And this case is really good for that. So Dargo, for us it's about an hour away from where we live. It's one of Victoria's most isolated towns, perfect for UFO activity. How I got it was, one of my team members gave me a yellowing old UFO document that had this case that occurred in 1976. He said, oh, it happened up near you might want to have a look at it. And I read the facts of the case, and I said, this is an awesome case. Like, this really needs to be looked at. It's fantastic. So I took that particular journal and read it about 50 times. And the case ticked these boxes. People doing something mundane are disturbed by something extraordinary. You've got to love that. The witnesses were ordinary folk, not seeking fame. We sought them out. We went looking for them. So me and Lana, like a couple of bloodhounds, we went looking for these people. No previous beliefs in UFOs. The object was different and showed amazing capabilities. It was a nighttime encounter, and that's when every man believes in God after dark. So what happened? 28th of January 1976, 11 p.m. Witnesses, a young man who was 19 and his female cousin who was 45. They were gherkin farmers. Everybody know what gherkins are? They're pickles, if you pick them small enough. And the encounter duration was roughly about a half-hour duration for that. And I classify it as a CE2 encounter, but it's bloody good. It's really good. So what's happening is they leave the little house and they're driving. I'll go back. They work in the field all day. At about 5 o'clock, they're going to go home. They turn the water pump on to water the crop, and they're going to drive home. And they drive home. At 11 o'clock at night, they drive back to turn the pump off because it's next to the Crooked River. So they hop in their car and they head out, right? And they see this little light, travelling around. And they think it's like a shooter's spotlight. Oh, there must be someone out shooting. This spotlight's just travelling around. Then this spotlight is interested in them. And this spotlight starts to pace the car. And they're driving along like this, and this thing is pacing the car with them, gliding along just above the treetops. And they drive up through a big cutting in the road, and they lose sight of it. And that was a bit weird. What was that? No, don't worry about it. And they drive through this wooded area in the middle of the dark, in the middle of the night. And they turn off the Dargo road and they go down over a little rickety, dinky bridge. And as they go down the dinky bridge, here's this light again. Hello. This light has appeared from the other side of the trees. They go over the bridge and it's on their right hand side. And this little ball of light shoots off ahead of them. They keep driving. They keep driving up the road. They come up to a crest of a hill, and on the right is a farm gate, just an ordinary old farm gate. Sitting above the farm gate is this light, waiting for them. And as they crest the top of the hill, gives me chills just thinking about it, right? They crest the top of the hill, a tremendous amount of light blasts out from this object, and it lights up the area like daylight for hundreds of metres around. And they got a look at the object. The object was 2 feet wide. 2 feet. It had 2 fins coming out horizontally, and it had 2 fins coming out at 45-degree angle underneath. So round, 2 feet round, 1 fin, other fin, 2 more fins. And this light. So this little 2-foot object, 2-foot wide object, no bigger than a basketball, perhaps bigger than a basketball, shines this tremendous amount of light. And the witnesses described it as a heat, a searing heat, a heat of light came onto them. They drove over the hill, they continued on their way down the hill, and this object just goes poof, and it just floats out as they're going down this windy hill. And they come down to this farm gate that she had to get out and open the farm gate to go down to turn the pump off. So she hops out of the car, she opens the gate, they jump back in, they go through the gate, and this object's just coming at the same height over the top. And they drive down to the pump, and the thing goes, vroom, and it hovers over the top of the pump. And it sits there. That's me sort of probably dramatising it, but it sits there like this, above the pump. She jumps out of the car. She's doing all the work. She jumps out of the car and she turns the pump off, and they drive at 60 miles an hour back up to the gate. The object follows them again. They go out the gate, open the gate, shut the gate, up in the car, back up the track. They get back up to where the gate was, the original gate, and the object goes up to the top, and it shines the light on them again. This big searing heat out of this little 2-foot wide object. And they drive down, they screech on the road, they go home, and they're all flustered, and their mother's like, oh, what happened to you guys? Oh, you don't want to know, you know, we had a really horrible experience out in the road. We don't know what it was terrible. And they could see this light in different valleys and canyons in the area afterwards, this light was flashing in different canyons as they were going around. What a cool story. You got to agree, that's a pretty cool story. It really is. And the reason I like it so much is for those reasons, and the fact that, and I like an object to be different. You know, silver discs and all that, and orange orbs are great, but you get something that's different, like that object, and I go, I'm really interested in that. This is a little round object. Keep going, Ben. So this is just some photos from the location. That's the cutting that they passed through. That's the little bridge that they actually drove over. So you can, this brings you to the spot. That's the road up to the where the gate was, and that's where the object was following them again, where those trees are to the right. And that's the money shot. That's where the object was hovering above that gate, and it shone that tremendous light. You can see how isolated this area is, and there's probably another shot here. That one. That's the road goes up where the trees are, and the thing came up this valley, tracking beside the car and going ahead up that beautiful Victorian high country valley. They drove down here. This is the road they went down the other side. That's the farm gate that she had to hurriedly rush out and open. And that's down to the gherkin patch, which was down on that flat countryside there. So that takes you to the spot. You guys can see that's where that happened, right there. That's Lana. Catching a photo on the gate. So, and that's our rendering of the object. That's how we, based on the description, that's how we sort of have drawn it, and that's how I tried to describe it. It looked something like that. Is it a probe? Oh, that's what I reckon it is. I reckon it's some sort of a probe. It's flying around out there, it's having a look, it's investigating, it's, oh, there's some people driving around, better go check that out over there, there's some cows, whatever. It's just out having a look. He noticed this object approaching from the south, and he could see it coming up, and he saw that it looked like a flying saucer, and it was, and he thought it was going to crash. So he hops in his car and he scoots back down the road and he drives off, and as he gets into Moama, this object suddenly appears again over the cemetery, and he continues driving on. Everyone keeps driving in my stories. And he gets to the main Echuca Moama road, and then this UFO is on the top of that intersection, and it tilts towards him, and you can see two men in green uniforms standing in this object, and the object then tilts off and it takes off. So it's a fairly brief case, but anything where there's humanoids involved, well, you've got to be interested. So I did a couple of shots, and that's his house where he lived. The description in the report that I had, as brief as it was, he said he was 5 miles out of Moama on the river. So I got on Google and I dragged the little icon 5 miles out of Moama, and there is the 5 mile boat ramp 5 miles out of Moama. That had to have been where he was. It had to have been where he was. He was 5 miles out of Moama on the Murray River, and I'm guessing that he probably most likely was at the 5 mile boat ramp for such an estimate like that. And this is the area here where he would have been fishing. And the UFO approached from way back down this area up over where he was on the river, where it says New South Wales, Victoria up there. So there's a cemetery where he drove past on the Paracuta Road. And that's the intersection where the object hovered over the top of the intersection, and basically this is what the object looked like. This is Duty's actual pictures, and that's his representation of the craft and the two little men that I did assume they had heads, but that's the witness's original drawing from 1974. This one here is a bit better. He describes it as perspex or glass on the top, men in green, and a brown colour to the base. And they stopped, they hovered over him, and you could see these two figures in a green uniform standing there looking at him. Interesting, quaint. It's the 70s. So it really had that kind of a feel to it. Good little case. Humanoids on the Higway, because I forgot to put a H in there. It actually is the highway, but I thought I'd put in Higway. 24th of August 1967 on the Hume Highway, 10 miles to the south of Albury, Wodonga, 5 p.m, August 5 p.m, August 5 p.m, that's cold. That's cold time of the year in Victoria, not up here, never cold up here. But down where I am, that's cold, and in inland where Albury is there, that's bloody cold. So Ron Hydes is riding on his motorcycle from Melbourne to Sydney, and he notices a flash come over the top of his head, and he sees this flying saucer go over the top of him, and he pulls up on his bike, and it hovers 3 to 4 feet off the ground, about 100 feet off in the paddock on the opposite side of the road, and it's hovering there, and then it lands. The next minute he sees 2 humanoid figures standing outside the front of this craft that's landed just off the Hume Highway, and they're wearing sort of like a aluminium foil type of a suit, and they've got these sort of black perspex style helmets on, and they start beckoning to him. Come, come. No, they didn't say come, but that's just me. And they start beckoning to him. Ron goes, screw that, hops on the bike, belts down the road. The object follows him fairly quickly. He said it was hovering over him at 60 mile an hour, even 100 mile an hour, and this object is still following him. He stops. He's trying to wave to other vehicles that there's these objects up in the sky, and he can't get anyone's attention, which is interesting because that often does happen with UFO reports. It's a singular person's experience, even if there's other people around. So he stops. The UFO stops, and he hops off the bike and he looks at it. It tilts at a 45-degree angle like that, and then it just goes bang, disappears, woof, straight up into the sky. Another great case, similar to the Echuca one, kind of short, brief, but high impact. So you've got to be happy with that. What would you do if on the side of the road this flying saucer lands and these little guys get out and they go, would you walk over? Yeah. Awesome, I would too. I would go over there. Even if they then went pew, I'd still go over there just to be pewed. So this is me on Google Maps, the great technology that we have. You can drag that sucker 10 miles back, and that would have been the approximate location near Barnawartha, which is a little town just on the Hume Highway, if anyone's familiar with the Albury area. And around this area here is where he had that encounter. And I pinpoint it to somewhere in this area, and this is sort of a higher shot of it. And I went walking up and down that highway on Google Maps, looking for any trace of something that might have looked like a UFO that had landed back in 1967, the year before I was born. Is there going to be anything there still? Not on that low resolution Google Maps image. And I'm looking at things like this, thinking maybe that's it. But that's like dams and things like that, so you can't rely on that. So that was just an explanation of that. That's Ron's actual picture of the craft. I have over here his actual Viewforce pro form that he filled out. That's the actual form that he filled out. And that's his drawing of the object that he saw on the Hume Highway at 5 p.m. on a cold August night. Curious. Traralgon. Traralgon is Latrobe Valley. The big power stations. It's kind of like The Simpsons, really. Like there's power station town, but they're not nuclear. They're obviously coal. So this is a great case on the 11th of the 9th, 1972 in Traralgon. A young man is riding his bike at 4:45 in the morning to work. And he notices up in the sky this light, this white object with a row of red lights around it and a blue light on top. And he's riding out there on his push bike at 4:45 in the morning, great time to see a UFO. And this thing starts following him as he's riding on his bike. And he gets back into, because he was riding out to work, and he turned around when he saw this object and rode back into Traralgon. So he's riding back into Traralgon, and he comes past the stockyards, and he sees the old stockyard guy there, and the stockyard guy is watching it too. And all the dogs are going off their bloody chops. All the dogs are barking and howling and distressed. The dogs are all going crazy at the sale yards. So he rides down to the police station, and he goes in there, and he sees the police and says, come out, come and have a look at this. And so the policeman comes out, and the policeman comes down and says, yeah, geez, there's something out there. And here's this white, round, circular light with a row of red lights around it and this blue light on top of it. And it sits out there, and it sits out there for like an hour and a quarter. It just sits out there, and eventually it just goes bing up into the sky. The next day, the next night, the same thing is there in the same place. And the same constable rings up the senior sergeant and says, you've got to come in, you've got to check this thing out. So the senior sergeant grumpily comes in, and he looks up and he goes, what the hell's that? Here's this same blue object, white spherical object, red, blue, hovering in the skies. Off it goes. That's all good. The night before, that was a Monday night. The night before, on a Sunday night, a family in Rosedale, we heard that before, they wake up that night, their horses start going crazy. They had two horses, a little pony called Lucky and another horse called Charmaine, from memory. And the horses are going mad. And they look out into their paddock and they see this object flying around in the corners of the paddock, hovering around in the paddock. And then the pony and the horse are going mad, and the thing takes off. So why do I like that case? You've got John Dixon, the guy riding the bike. You've got the stockyard guy, the three policemen that actually saw it, because another policeman saw it as well. And then you've got the family in Rosedale, all on consecutive evenings where this object has appeared consecutively over time. And this is also relevant for other deeper part of the conversation. And that's one of the badly drawn illustrations by one of the witnesses of what that was the guy from the stockyards, how he saw the object as looking. That's the senior sergeant, Ron Tannen, who saw it. And this is the family here. So Kath and Brian Perry, and that's their picture of what they saw. You've got to love the 70s, the way they're dressed. That was the good old 70s, 1972. And there's Lucky, who wasn't so lucky. So he's running around the paddock, and poor little pony, and he's bloody terrified. Looks like a sweet little guy. And the guy pointing is a reporter from Melbourne who wrote an article on the Traralgon and the Rosedale incident. And he's out there, and he went down and had a look at it, and Lucky's a first-hand witness. You just can't talk to him. That's the original articles. Silver Ball over town. Well, you've got to love that, don't you? Like, I'd love reading that now, let alone in 1972. And that's the article, Out of the Night Came. That's the dramatic title, Out of the Night Came. And that talks about that particular case. This case is also great. Note, the 20th of the 9th, 1972, in the same month, the next town down, Sale, Victoria, East Gippsland, Nappers Bend. In the country, places get names and they're not on maps. So Nappers Bend, the Fingerboards. Locally, places get, and I'm sure it's the same in Queensland, there's areas that just get little names that the locals know and no one else knows. So Lana and I, basically, one of her father's friends in Sale, we asked him, who knew a lot about UFOs in the local area, we asked him to pinpoint where the hell is Napper's Corner. It's nowhere. We looked in white pages and we found a family called Napper, and we looked where that was, and we thought, well, maybe it's down there. That's not right. And then Mike put us on the right track, and he said, no, it's on this particular turn off on the Clydebank Road, is where Napper's Corner is. That won't mean much to anyone, but that's where it was. And at 4:40 a.m, Constable K. Jarvis, that's not him, that's just a stock photo of a policeman, and that's probably 80s, not 70s, when they had the hairdryers. And he was driving around out in that area on his rounds, and he looks up and he sees this object in the sky in the vicinity of Napper's Corner. That's the information we've got. And he watches it descend to the ground, and then it takes off again, up into the sky. So he drives around to the Sale RAAF base, and he walks into the Sale RAAF base and he says, have you guys got anything flying around out there tonight? Because I saw something was flying around out there out near Napper's Corner, something's flying around. No, nothing's going on, as you expect the RAAF to say. So one of the military guys hops in the police car, and they both drive back out to Napper's Corner to have a look. So the police constable, civilian, like a civic police officer and military representative hop in divvy van and drive back out to Napper's Corner. They get out there and they see a light coming from Marley Point, which is on Lake Wellington, which is, you're going to have to get on Google and look at my area, big lake out there, and they see this light coming from the east towards them. So the military guy and the policeman see this light coming. The light comes and it stops over the top of the car, and it then shines this light down over the two men and the patrol car, and they're standing there looking up at this light, and this light is all bathed around them and the car. The object flies off and the light remains. So they're standing there with their car in this glow of light that it's like the object had gone poof, there it is, and left this light there, and it's flown off. And that's pretty unreal, isn't it? So, and this is a policeman reporting this. It's not a couple of guys who've had a couple of VBs and perhaps a bit of weed. This is a policeman reporting this, and a military officer from the Sale RAAF base, which we'll keep talking about. That's the only information we have on the case. And that's from an old VUFOA scrapbook. So that's all there is. And that's an article from the Gippsland Times on the 21st of the 9th that Constable K. Jarvis was out patrolling that night at 4:40 in the morning. He saw something weird. He got the military guy to come out. They both saw something weird, and then it flew off, and then they're still covered in light. Military guys and police officers. Farmer meets a UFO. This one's a great one, Willow Grove, 5th of February 1963, 7 a.m. in the morning. It was raining, and Charles and Trevor Brew were milking the cows at Willow Grove, which is what they do every day. They milk the dairy cows. The cows were coming into the yard. Trevor was in on the diesel, had diesel engines back then, milking the cows in the shed. His father was out in the outside herding the cows in. It's low cloud. All of a sudden at 7 a.m, this object comes boom below the clouds, and it tilts down. And Charles Brew's standing there like this, looking up at this flying saucer that's just popped out of the cloud deck. Came down, hovered down over the top of where they were. All the cows, if you can tell what happened to the cows, they all surged forward into the shed where Trevor was, and Trevor's getting all these cows coming into the shed. And there's this noise, there's this rotating bull roaring type sound outside. Then the object tilts and it flies out over the Baw Baw Ranges, and off it goes. This is 1963. So, a very strange case. The RAAF did investigate it, and the RAAF said that it was a tornado. A weather event. That was their lame ass explanation for that particular event. Seriously? A tornado? So there's a drawing of what the object looked like. It had a clear perspex-like top, kind of similar to what we had up at Echuca. A gunmetal colour in the midsection, and then a rotating section underneath that rotated, I think it was anti-clockwise, and a blue glow that came from underneath it at 7 a.m. in Willow Grove. It's about the most loveliest postcode you could ever have next to your name, Willow Grove. Well, it just sounds like wind in the willows, doesn't it? It's a lovely place, and it is a really beautiful place. This object appeared in the skies for a farmer. There's another picture of it, perhaps slightly better drawn, of what the object looked like with the rotating, the blue glow, the bull roaring sound that was coming out of it. There's another object. I think that's actually a RAAF illustration of the object. And then here's the local paper got onto it, the Advocate, the Maui Advocate. A flying saucer or something sent a horse and herd of cows into a panic at Mr. Charles' farm of Willow Grove on Friday morning. Interesting. And then someone wrote a song, From Mars to Maui. Yeah. There's a little verse. I haven't heard the tune, but that's a song. So Lana, myself and Andrew, we went out to Willow Grove. I rang up Trevor because the dad would be long dead. Rang up Trevor, said, Trevor, we want to do a video on your UFO encounter. And I found him. He was easy to find. And he goes, no, I don't know. I just don't think I'm interested, really. But no, thanks. And I said, no, come on, Trev, come on. Really, it'd be great. We need to hear this story. We want to get this story down. Oh, yeah, well, maybe I could. When are you thinking about it? And I said, oh, well, when are you available? And then you have that back and forth about when you can do it. So we met him, and he took us out to the farm. This is the actual location. That's the dairy shed that he was standing in. That's him, a close-up view. And so Trevor was the young man in the shed, now a little bit older. And that was the house. Oh, what's that mean? This computer will reboot in 3 minutes. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. So that's where the cows came through, and that's where the UFO was actually hovering. The UFO was hovering. Oh, I've got a pointer. Works a bit better. The UFO was hovering here, in this area here, just on the rise from the dairy farm. I mean, come on, 7 a.m. in the middle of cow country. This thing pops out of the cloud deck, low cloud, and it sits there spinning and rotating and making bull roaring noises, and then tilts and flies off. I mean, it's not an everyday experience. And that's where the cows came running down that part of the paddock there. And that's me and Trevor pointing toward the area. It's a very riveting shot. There's me pointing to the area, another riveting shot. Okay, brag along. So we're moving pretty quickly, not too bad for time. So, 1978, another connection to Lana. Her father and his friend knew this guy who's Austrian, Eric. 3 a.m. in September 1978, when Fred Valentich disappeared in October, so this is just a month prior to him disappearing, he's going to go deer hunting out out at in the hills out near Bryagalong, and at 3 a.m, him and his godson, who was the son of a guy he worked with at the town in Maffra where they lived, 3 a.m, they hop in their car and they drive out, and they head out to an area called Valencia Creek, and it's all flooded and they can't go out that way, and they come back and they come around and they see this light hovering above a house, and he what's that? You know, maybe it's a pump at the top of some sort of a structure, a pump. And they drive past that. Then you know the familiar story. This light starts following the car, and the light is pacing the car. He speeds up, the light speeds up. He slows down, the light slows down, and it follows him for about how far is it from Valencia Creek? Oh, I've just lost my video. From Valencia Creek, and it follows him into Bryagalong, and this light is this flying saucer, and it shoots ahead of him, and it waits above the crossroads of the town, and as his car approaches, the flying saucer, he said it was like it was on a yo-yo. It comes down towards the car like a swooping magpie. It comes down towards the car, and he puts the brakes on, and this flying saucer comes straight at the car, and then it spins back to where it was. Turns around, keeps going, everybody keeps driving, it's amazing. And he drives out, and the flying saucer follows them out of town. And then it shoots off into the distance. And they both go, that's interesting, what's going on here? So that's what happens. And they drive to their destination, which is right out in the bush. Here's the really interesting part. When they get to that location, the saucer is waiting at that location. And it's sitting, hovering in the paddock. And they stop the car and they're looking unbelievably at this thing that is sitting there. And Eric is as true a guy as you'd ever meet. Like, he really is. Like, if he says it happened, it happened. And this object is sitting there. And then this probe comes out from underneath the UFO, and it tilts, and it goes across the paddock, and it flies across the top of the valley, and it's got a light on it, and the light's flashing. And it goes right out to the opposite side. And then it basically does something out in the paddock, and then it comes back to the craft. It goes back into the craft, and then over the next 45 minutes, the craft slowly ascends. As the daylight breaks, this craft is slowly ascending up, until by the time dawn comes, there's just a light and it's gone. So that's a really interesting case that occurred in Bryagalong, which is in that same area as the Sale RAAF base. So now I'm going to talk about the Sale RAAF base, and I don't think I've got any more slides, but I can still talk without the slides. So the Sale RAAF base is the most interesting base. I'd almost go to say it's probably one of the most interesting RAAF facilities in the country. It really is. It's a little sleepy hollow. It's a sleepy hollow. It's this little base on the east side of Sale. Anyone heard of the Roulettes? Yeah. The Roulettes, which is the Air Force's acrobatics team. They're based at the Sale RAAF base. The Sale RAAF base is also the major training centre for all pilots now. All pilot training and navigator training is done at the Sale RAAF base. The federal government has just spent an exorbitant amount of money upgrading the Sale RAAF base. They've spent millions of dollars, like $85 million, or even $1 billion, but they spend a huge amount of money upgrading the base. And you can't really see what they've done. But they've spent the money on the base. They've spent that money on that RAAF base, that little RAAF base that could. They've spent that money on it. And the amount of interesting events that have occurred around that base, the one where the water tank got sucked, that's about half an hour from the RAAF base. The hunter and the boy, that's about half an hour from the RAAF base. The sucked water tank, the lagoon that was sucked and I got jumped on by the kelpies, that's about half an hour from the RAAF base. Lake Wellington, which is nearby, we've heard stories of lights floating around under the waters of Lake Wellington at night. We have a story of US Special Forces training at the RAAF base for basically for protection of oil rigs, because off the coast in Bass Strait there's oil rigs out there, and US forces were actually at the RAAF base doing the Sale RAAF base. US forces were there doing exercises, training. and they were doing a perimeter patrol at the Sale RAAF base, the US soldiers, and they look out to the south and they see these lights descend out of the sky, and these lights just start to dance and move and rotate in this little ballet type of a dance effect, and then the whole thing just goes back up. And these US soldiers actually reported it to MUFON. It's actually a MUFON case, but it occurred at the Sale RAAF base. Napper's Corner, where the policeman, that is about 10 minutes from the Sale RAAF base. So there's kind of a picture about that. There's a lot of activity around the Sale RAAF base. And there's an urban legend from the Sale RAAF base, which is a really cool one. And I'm going to relate it to you fairly briefly. It would be good if we could get the slides back, but it's not essential. So at the Sale RAAF base, there's a story, and there was in the mid-1980s, there was a admin building that had been built at the Sale RAAF base, and they were going to have an official opening. Kim Beazley, the Minister for Defence at the time, was going to the Sale RAAF base to open this admin building. So they sent out the usual invitations to various media to come and watch Kim Beazley open a building at the Sale RAAF base. And one of the crews in Melbourne, television crews, send a helicopter and a reporter and a camera guy, and they hop in the helicopter and they fly down to Sale. And they arrive early due to the fact that the weather was really great and they had a tailwind. And in planes, you can be late taking off and land on time. Like it actually does happen, even with Tiger and Jetstar and all those guys. So basically, what was I saying? So that basically happens. And they arrive at the base, and they arrive early. And the helicopter lands on the base. They hop out, and they're met by a security guard, or guards. And they say, you were here? Yeah, no problem that you're early, that's fine. There's a lounge. Just go hang out in the lounge, and when we're ready, we'll come and get you guys. So they're left to their own devices. They're sent to this lounge area at Sale RAAF base, just near the helicopter pad. They get a bit bored because they've got a little bit of time to wait. So they go outside and they start taking a few shots to put into the story about Kim Beazley opening up an admin building, as riveting as that is. And they thought, oh, there's some hangars over there. Why don't we just go over there for a look? And there's no one around. There's nobody around. And the base can be like that. And Lana's going to speak in a minute about something. So they go over to this hangar and they open the doors, as you can well imagine TV guys probably doing, and they look in, and down the back of the hangar they see a saucer on 3 legs. This is the story, right? I'm not saying this happened. This is the story. And there's a scaffold around the craft. And there's an office. And inside the office is a man who looked like Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Big white coat, white hair, and these 2 little guys in there. And they're walking into the hangar and they're just filming, walking around filming. And they walk up to the office and the guy, the Doc Brown comes out. And Doc Brown goes, "What are you guys doing here? Do they want more footage from headquarters?" And they go, "No, we're not from headquarters." And the guy just goes ballistic. "You guys have got to get out of here. Get out, get out, get out." And so they turn on their heels and off they go. Out, and they're walking back to where they should have been, and a security car pulls up, gets out, and the guys are polite and nice to say, "Oh guys, how are you? Good, yeah, great. Can we see a camera?" Yep. So they give him the camera and they said, "You guys were filming in the hangar?" Yes. Yeah, that was us. We were caught. We were filming in the hangar with the camera. And they take the tape. So they confiscate the tape. And the rest of it, and then they basically put in another tape and they film the opening of the building, and they fly back. A few days later, they receive a tape in the mail from the RAAF, and it's just an empty new cassette to replace the one that had been taken. And the guys had this thought that there was something kind of strange about that situation, and they thought about the little guys that were working in the hangar with Doc Brown, and they thought that they looked like children. And so just something didn't look right. They just thought it was RAAF hiring dwarves for some reason. That's the story. So that's an urban legend about the Sale RAAF base. And I'm sure there's a billion of them for Area 51 and half a dozen other bases around the world, but that's the Sale RAAF base urban legend. So we went to the Sale RAAF base recently, or a year ago, or 18 months ago, or whenever it was, because they had an open day. And you never miss the opportunity to go to a RAAF base if there's an open day. You just go. You just do that. You go to RAAF day open bases, not to be missed. So we walked in there and we thought, this is a real long shot type of a story. Like, it really is a big story. And we walked in there and we said, okay, we've just got to try and find a building. If we can find a building that was opened in the 80s, it might start to give that story a bit of credibility. And I had a picture of the building and the plaque that was opened by Kim Beazley in 1988, in the mid to late 80s. And we thought to ourselves, wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. Kim Beazley was there in the mid 80s opening up a RAAF base. George Simpson gave me a great case as well, also from a woman in Stratford. Stratford is about 15 minutes from the Sale RAAF base. And this woman wakes up one night in Stratford at about 3:30 a.m. Her cat wants to go outside and go to the toilet. So she gets up and she walks over to the door and she looks out the window and she sees a huge carousel of lights sitting in the sky, silently sitting there. And she sort of steps back and she looks out another window. There's another one, another carousel of lights sitting in the sky, just sitting there. She rings the RAAF base and she says, there's something in the sky over Stratford here. What's going on? And the guy at the base says, no, there's nothing going on. Yeah, we had someone else ring up and report something, but no, there's nothing going on, just go back to bed. And she did. How do you do that? It's like Independence Day is out there. You know, the Armada has arrived and they're sitting out there, and but it's another story, of what happens around that time. Yeah. So yeah, that's quite interesting, and there's a lot of there's sort of reports from the base too that at night time residents hear things landing and taking off in the middle of the night at the base. So and it's kind of like sounds that aren't, because they have the regular planes that come and go, but they've had other planes that have had different sounds, deeper sounds. Like a B-2 bomber, a B-2 stealth bomber is not actually quiet. Don't confuse stealth with quiet. Stealth means it's hard to pick up on radar. Doesn't mean that the damn thing's silent. And I've watched a video of them taking off there's a great video on YouTube of B-2 bombers taking off from London, and they're sitting on the runway, these big black cool looking things, and they're still making those jet type sounds as they lumber off and take off with no apparent means of being able to get up there, but they do. So it's quite possible, and this is speculation, that maybe some of this stuff does come and land there in the middle of the night, maybe takes off again. It's a military base. I mean, you have to expect these type of things to occur. But when you've got US Special Forces seeing strange things in the sky, you have got consistent reports from around the area, around that base, it certainly raises eyebrows about why would this little base have so much activity, and most of it within half an hour of the base. It really is very interesting that that's the case. So, and then this wacky urban legend about a flying saucer being in the hangars. I mean, to me, it's still a stretch that is a true story, but you still have to look at it from a logical perspective and try and find, if you've got the time and the inclination, to see what you can find that might actually support a story like that. And our first effort kind of supported it. So, and the other thing I thought about that story was would they really send a news crew? Would they really send a news crew to watch Simon Beazley open an admin building? that's got to be slow news day, doesn't it? That's got to be nothing happening in the news to watch Simon Beasley go...
Kim Beasley.
Oh, Kim Beasley. Sorry, I got the wrong name.
Was his brother, was it?
Yes, probably, yeah. That's Murray Head, actually, isn't it? That's another odd joke with Cheryl. So, yes, sorry, Kim Beasley. So that would have to be, and that to me was another reason why I thought, maybe it's just a crap story. You know, would they really send a news crew to watch a minister open a building? I don't know. Maybe they did. They did. So, you know, so that's just interesting. So in closing, I'm just going to do one more case. It is 1978 again. It is in an area called Swanpool, which is near Benalla. And Benalla is in central Victoria. And a young man, his mother and his father were going to a party. And they went to this party. The father was a member of a famous Australian rock band. And they were going to this party in Swanpool. So they go to this party. The mother and the husband have a fight. This can happen. And she grabs the boy, who was about 10, and hops in the car. Oh, we're going. And they're going to leave him there. So they drive back to Benalla. And as they're driving back to Benalla, they see this beer keg spinning end to end with a row of lights on either end, and it starts pacing the car as they're driving up back to Benalla, and it's travelling along next to the car, spinning next to the car. It shoots off over to the left and goes out into a paddock and hovers out in the paddock. She turns the car and drives through the fence. And she's driving out into the paddock, flat out with the headlights and the dust and the grass, and she's heading towards this object, driving madly towards this object, hovering out in the paddock, spinning out in the paddock. The car just comes to a complete stop. Boom. And there's dust, and they open the doors and they get out, and the object just spins and disappears off into the horizon. So they hop back in the car and they drive back out, back onto the Benalla Road, and they drive back out and they go home. Go to bed. Next morning, the mother comes running into the room and she pulls his dacks down. And he's got 3 prongs on his bum. And she also has got 3 prongs on her bum. So he rang me up and he told me this story. And I said, that's a pretty interesting story. That really is incredible. And I said, what, just out of additional interest, what band was it? Little River Band. So if you've heard of the Little River Band, they were big in the 70s, and that was the band. So it just goes to show you that there really are a lot of strange things that have occurred. That's a really small nutshell of the amount of cases that Victoria has actually had. There's been so many cases over the years, and a lot of the big ones, Westall, Kelly Cahill, the Rosedale case, the Burke's Flat case, a lot of stuff has happened in Victoria. But Victoria is not unique in that fact that most states in Australia also have similar stories over an extended period of time. Queensland, New South Wales. I mean, Tully is the most famous case around the world for Queensland. Everybody in the world knows about the Tully case, and it's a great case. Also from 1966, January 1966. So if you're not familiar with that case locally, I'd encourage you to read up about the Tully case. And across the country, that UFO history is still there in other states. So if you are interested, get out there, have a look locally in your own area. It really is great. There's nothing better than local UFO. It really is. Local UFO is better than Rendlesham Forest. It's better than Roswell. It's better than any of those stories. Local is way cooler than any of that overseas stuff. You find the local cases in your local area, and there's a connection to your area that something strange is going on. So thanks for your time.